Okay, Nathan, if you could read Psalm 84 for us, that'd be a great start.
Okay, just a second. Okay. למנצח על הגיתית, לבני קורח מזמור, מגידידות משכנותיך, אדוני צבאות, נכספה, וגם קלטה נפשי לחצרות אדוני, ליבי ובשרי ירננו אל חי, גם ציפור מצאה בית ודרור כן לה, ששת אפרוחיה, את מזבחותיה אדוני צבאות מלכי, אלוהי, אשרי יושבי ביתך, יהיו בצלע, אשרי האדם, עוז לו בך, תפילות לרבם, עוברי בעמק הבכה, מעיין תשיתוהו, גם ברכות, עטה מורה, ילכו מחיל אל חיל, יראה אל אלוהים בציון, אדוני, אלוהים צבאות, שמעת תפילתי, האזינה, אלוהי יעקב סלע, הגיננו, רואי אלוהים והבט, פני משפטך, טוב יום בחצריך מעל, בחרתי הסתופף בבית אלוהי מדור ועולה רשע משמש ומגן אדוני אלוהים חן וכבוד ייתן אדוני וימנעתו להולכים בתמים אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much. Okay, that is one of the weirdest things I've ever asked anybody to do, um, is to like walk out of a coffee shop, walk out of a bakery, and recite Psalms. That is definitely one of the weirder things, and so I appreciate that very much. That was quite the thing. Um,
Avram, what number are we on again? I
okay,
didn't.
we are on 84.
Okay,
Eighty-four.
thank you.
Psalm 84. Okay, so we'll get started. Lamnatseach, of course, that's an instruction. It's an instruction to the conductor or to the person who kind of keeps things going. It says al hagitit, and we don't know exactly what a gitit is. It's some kind of a stringed instrument, but we don't know exactly what it is. Livnei Korach Mizmor, a psalm of the sons of Korach. And I mentioned before, these sons of Korach are kind of an interesting story. Questions like you know, what happened to them? We know the whole story about Korach and and how he's um, sinks into the earth. And who are these sons of Korach, and how do we know what they sing, and everything else. And the beautiful story in the Midrash that when they didn't get sunk into the deepest of hells, but only to the highest shelf, and so they could be heard singing through the cracks of the earth. They could be heard singing their songs. So okay. Ma yedidot mishkanotecha, how beautiful or how dear are your dwellings. Adonai Tzvaot. Um, so Adonai Tzvaot is usually translated as Lord of Hosts. Lord of Hosts. So I'll tell you a little bit about that name. There's actually an interesting debate in Jewish law about whether or not that is one of the names. There are certain names of God which can't be erased, which can't be thrown out, which have to be treated with respect. And there's a kind of an argument about whether or not that name, whether that name, Lord of Hosts, Adonai Tzvaot, whether that, or as some people would say, Adonai Tzvakot, right, or Hashem Tzvakot, in order to avoid saying it. Um, whether or not that's one of the names of God which has this special status. So one of the reasons why there's a question is because it doesn't actually appear in the it doesn't appear in the Torah itself, doesn't appear in the five books of Moses at all, and we don't hear this name, although clearly it's in Tehillim in the Psalms. We don't hear this name until the book of until I think it's Malachim, Kings, I think, where Hannah is a woman who's, thank you, Shmuel, thank you, the book of Shmuel. I have this is what I have Nathan for because my brain is scrambled. Thank you. So Hannah is praying for a child. Hannah is praying for a child, and she uses the expression um, uh, Adonai Tzvaot, Lord of hosts. So the Midrash explains this in a very cute way. I have to say it's cute because it is kind of cute. So imagine there's this king, right? And he's having a party. And this beggar comes to the door, and the beggar wants a slice of bread. Okay? And he comes to the door and he says, "Excuse me, but may I have a slice of bread?" And he sees that the head of the household, the king, is about to say no. And he turns to me and says, "But look at this. You're having this big party. You have plenty of food. You have lots of stuff. Look at all that stuff you have there. It's not too much for you to give me one slice of bread." So he says, in the same way, he refers to God as Hashem Tzvot, as the Lord of hosts. And so Ahmad, usually people understand this as he translates here as who rules over angels, right? The God who has hosts of angels. Says you have lots and lots and lots and lots of creatures. So here I am, a poor would-be mother praying for a child. You have all these creatures. How about you just give me one, right? I just want one. Okay, I just want one child. I just want one child. If you could see your way. And so now, so interestingly, so you would think, aha, okay, so you would think that you would find, if that's the meaning, right, that this is, oh, you God who has lots of creatures, give me a child. You would think that it would be used that way all over the place, but it is not used that way all over the place. In fact, as far as I know, it's never used that way again, right? You don't see it anywhere else used that way, and certainly that's not how David HaMelech uses it. So it's a strange expression. One might think, right? So one way to see it is how he sees it here, right? That um, it means the God who has all these different all these angels. Um, and because the word tzava, right, also means troops, right? Also means troops. So it's kind of like these troops of angels. I do like, and I've mentioned this before, I do like the translation of um, uh, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shlomi, who says that what characterizes the tzvaot, right? All of these hosts, is that they're all different, right? There's a whole bunch of different kinds. There's there's seraphim, these fiery angels. There's keruvim. There's these different kinds of beings, different kinds of angels, and so um, he translates it as God of diversity, as Lord, as God of diversity of all these different kinds of things. So I kind of like that one. I'm not sure if it really captures the kind of original sense, but it certainly has a very cool sense of it. So he says, so how beloved are your dwellings? And here, Mishkan, right? Can refer, right? So if we want to understand this literally, right, refer to the the official dwellings of God, right? The tabernacle in the desert, the maybe the temple that King David is dreaming of, right? Could be all that, but really any place where God dwells, right? Any place where God dwells and our yedidot are something which is dear and something which is dear and precious. Nichsafa v'gam kalta nafshi says my soul yearns. Uh, says my soul yearns and even aches. This expression kalta nafshi actually is used um, by David HaMelech to refer to his son. He has this longing to see his son Avshalom at one point, and he uses this expression. So it's an expression of longing to have the direct experience of something, if that makes sense. Um, in Hasidic philosophy, Kalas Nefesh, because it has a kind of a side meaning of related to extinction, right? So Kalta Nafshi could also mean uh, my soul is extinguished. That's another way to see it. Right? So imagine that you had such a longing for something that you wanted only to become one with it, right? You had such a longing for something you only wanted to become one with it. You wanted to unite with it. And so the Hasidic idea, understanding the Kalas Nefesh, is this idea of a longing to nullify oneself um, to the ultimate to the ultimate beloved God. So there's this express. So here it's his soul is yearning even to the point of extinction. That's one way of understanding it. Lachatzrot Hashem, to be in for the guard for the courtyards of God. Libi v'sari yanu el chai, and my heart and my flesh cry out. Or Yirananu really means to celebrate, right? It's not here, right? We kind of switched, right? When it talks about nichsafa v'gam kalta nafshi, it's a longing and it's almost painful. But the bivisari Yirananu elechai says Yirananu means also to rejoice, um, to be excited. It's not just that feeling of longing. It says so my heart and my flesh, and I've heard there's this idea of what some people refer to as embodied spirituality, right? Sometimes we think of spirituality as being something that takes place in our heads or something that takes place maybe in our hearts, but here it's referring to to our flesh itself, as that like a line. It's called Atzmontai Tamar. Now all of my bones praise you, right? That it's not just it's that the longing for God and even in the rejoicing in God is something that's not just of the heart, but really of the whole body. El Chai, God was the living God. To me, by the way, whenever the expressions about God that I think I love most are the ones that involve the word "Hai," the ones that involve the word life. Because for me, I guess I most relate to God as a God of life. Um, you have expressions like "Che Olamim," the life of the worlds, and here it's El Chai, the you could make it an adjective like he does too. Here, the living God, right? Or it could be the God of life. She says, Gam tzipur matzah bayit. He says, even a bird has found a home. It's interesting, by the way. I saw a source that said that the word sparrow was related to the word tzipur. Okay, so I don't know if that's true or not, but it's interesting. So Gam Tzipor Matzah Bayit, he says, so a bird, or it could be a sparrow, found a home. Udarur Kenla, it says, and even a swallow has a nest, right? Even a swallow has a nest. We have kind of it's interesting that we just called him El Chai, the God of life, and now we use an example from nature, right? Is that birds have found a home, and the swallow has a nest. Aser shata efrocheha, um, and to settle her young. Now, Um, so okay, Rashi takes this differently. So Rashi takes, and I think if I remember correctly, he takes it differently. He says he says Gam tizor matzah bayit udra kain la asher shata efrocheha. He says that the bird has found a home and the swallow a nest to settle her young. Et mizbechotecha Adonai tzvot malki velohai. It says, and for me, right, what would be my home? Right? What would be my home? My home would be your altars. Okay, that would be my home. Because remember, I said before, right? Remember before he talked about Mishkonatecha, right? He talked about your sanctuaries, and now he's talking about your altars. So that would be my home, right? Everybody, all just as a bird has a place to settle itself, as a place to be satisfied with its children. I want a place. Adonai Tzvot Malki says, my God, my King and my God, my King and my God. Whenever I see this, I think I've told this story a million times. I'll tell it again. We use this word melech, this word king, and I feel like it's an image that I think most of us don't relate to anymore. Right? We don't have experience of kings. Um, it's hard to relate to. But my king and my God. Ashrei Yoshvei Betecha, happy are those who dwell in your house. I said before, Ashrei is related to Osher, right? It means having the best of life, being happy, being contented, everything. Yoshvei Betecha, those who dwell in your house, those who sit in your house. It's a state of relaxation, of being settled. So those who dwell in your house, happy are they, happy are they. Od Yalucha Sela, they will keep praising you. Ashrei Adam, happy is the person, Oz Lobach, whose 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 strength is you, right? That's the best way, whose strength is in you. Right? The person who's the word Oz, that feels like an onomatopoeia to me. I don't know. For some reason it feels like somehow or another strength sounds like that. Oz, right? So it's a very powerful word. Says so happy is the person who sees you. So happy, so we have two ashrays. Happy is the person who lives in God's house and keeps praising him, and happy is the person who sees God as a strength. Misilot bilvavam. Now, this expression is also strange. So misilot means pathways, right? Um, uh, in their heart. Okay, so what is that? What is that supposed to mean? So there are a couple of different ways of understanding it. It's not clear. It could mean, so one interpretation, I think this is Rashi, is that it's like a highway. Who make of their heart a kind of highway, and make it go nice and straight, right? Apparently, misilot are straight paths. There are a couple different words for pathways. There's Nitivot and Shvil and a bunch of others. And I guess Misilot means a straight path. So he makes his path straight in his heart. You know, that's one. The other is that Misilot, his ways are in his heart, that God's Misilot, right? That God's ways. We often talk about Darchei Hashem, the ways of God, right? So maybe that's the idea here, that God's ways are in their hearts. But admitted, it's an unusual expression. Zovrei be'emek habacha. Um, those who cross, it's interesting. Our translator here says ovre means transgressors. Well, it could mean that, right? Because avar means to literally to cross over or to cross through, but it can also mean to transgress, right? You can sort of see to cross over the limits, so to speak. It can mean that too. So ovre could also mean transgressors, and so he translates it here as this is Ovrei be'emek habacha. Those people, the transgressors, end up, right? Or they arrive in the emek habacha, in the valley of tears, right? In the valley of tears. You could also understand it as those who travel, right, through the valley of tears, right? What would it mean to travel through the valley of tears? I would, remember the veil of tears. I guess that's the that's the fancy English expression. What does it mean to, what does it, avar can also mean to travel, right? To pass through, right? So people pass through the veil of tears. Well, that's this entire world, right? This world is a veil of tears. This world is full of suffering, right? There's nobody who escapes, I don't think. Everybody has to go through it. There's no escaping that. Um, he says, and there, ma'ayin yeshiduhu. He says, they create a fountain, mayan, a fountain or a spring. So v'gam brochot ya'ate more, and they will shower their judge with thanks. Now, again, the language here is a little weird. Um, it's a little weird because you could say it like you could read it like this. It says, when they pass through the valley of tears, they make it into a spring, right? Imagine the that they pass through the valley of tears, they make it into a spring. They transform the valley of tears into a spring. They take it and they manage to turn it around.
Yeah,
And then,
that's the trans. I was gonna say
yeah,
that's the translation. The JPS translation takes that tack. It has they pass through the valley of Baca, which is tears, regarding it as a place of springs, as if the early rain had covered it with blessing. So, like the JPS translation sees it as, I'm reading this as, if you find refuge in God, then your sufferings, you see them as if they are blessings, because as if your tears are like the water of a spring, because you're so immersed in God. That's how I'm reading it.
right,
But
right.
yeah, but that's how they have it, is regarding it as a place of springs, as if the earth rain,
Yes.
excuse me, the early rain had
Yeah.
covered it with blessing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, the language, it's interesting. The language is surprisingly, so that last part, Gam brachot ya'ate more, um, I mean, I would read it pretty straightforwardly as they they wrap their guide, they wrap their guide in blessings. Um, uh, I mean, if you sort of imagine God as sort of guiding them through the vale of tears. And because we just talked about the mistilot, about the pathways, right? Right, these pathways. So, right, if you're going along the pathways, you also need a guide. So they go through this vale of tears, and there this vale of tears turns into a place of springs and fresh water, and the yatet wrap, right, like right, they wrap, or they cover their more, their guide, um, in blessings. It's interesting.
If I may, veil, I remember learning is a kind of a Latin for farewell too. So VALE is like
Oh,
or
is that
goodbye.
true? That's
Huh,
also goodbye. Okay,
like a
good.
goodbye. So I'm imagining, you're setting out on this journey kind of thing, with your guide.
Yeah.
You're going into the valley.
Really, veil is a good is a
Yeah, it's a Latin, let's see, I can look it.
interesting.
It's a synonym for a valley, but it's also a Latin word used for parting.
Okay.
So, um,
Okay.
Abram, are you saying, I hear what uh, Yonason said, in where it's sort of in a way hiding, cloaking or hiding the tears. The tears still exist, but you're sort of hiding the tears, but you're saying something different.
Right. They've
You're saying
well,
that you're in a
it
good,
says that they become like Mayan. They become like springs. Right? Tears are salty and few, ultimately, right? And springs are fresh and sweet and abundant. So it goes from, so we go through the valley of tears and it becomes, and he makes it into a place of springs, into a spring. And it could be, brachot also, I mean, there could be a pun here also, because brachot means blessings, berechot means pools. So it could be that there's also a little bit of a, it could be there's also a little bit of a pun here because we're talking about water. So it's brechot ya'ate more, right? That they sort of they surrounding the guide with pools, as opposed to brachot, which is blessings. But um, it's just one little, it's just one little vowel that would make a difference there. Okay. Yelchum Michael El Chayil. You hear this expression. This is very common in modern Hebrew. Michael El Chayil. It says they go from one success to another success, or from one Chayil can also mean from one virtue to another virtue, from one strength to another strength. And our translator here goes Yahum Echayel, and that's actually following Rashi, is going from one holy house to another, right? That they're kind of passing, they're passing from one, from one temple to the other. They're kind of moving through the holy spaces. But it could also mean that they're growing, right? Usually nowadays when people say, "Yeah, Michael L'chael," I mean that people are growing in virtue or in quality or kind of developing themselves. So it could mean a physical moving, Yehu, right? Could mean physical moving. Could also mean moving in a way of progressing. But he says here, your dwellers will go from one holy house to another. V'yira'eh Elohim b'Tzion, and it says they will appear before God in Tzion. And in this case, Tzion probably means the Mishkan or the temple, right? The field in Zion. It says Adonai Elohim Tzvaot. It says and and God, God of Tzavot, right? God of legions, Lord of hosts, Lord of diversity, however you want to understand that. It says Shema Tfilati, hear my prayer. Ha'azinu Elohei Yaakov Selah. It says, and listen, God of Jacob. It says, Maginenu Elohim. It says, God, look at our shield. And Rashi says the shield is referring to the temple, um, referring to the temple. Why the temple would be referred to as a shield, I'm not exactly sure, um, but that's what he says. He says, "But look at our shield." It says, "The habet pnei mishichecha," and look at the face of your anointed. Now, Mishichecha, right? So that you probably recognize that word as Mashiach or Messiah, right? Can also mean anointed. So one way to understand this is referring to King David, right? Who was anointed, who was the anointed king of Israel, right? He was anointed the anointed king, and so therefore he could be called Mashiach, he could be called the anointed one. Or this could be a kind of prophecy, referring to referring to um, the Mashiach. Or it could be, right? Maginenu Elohim habe b'nei Mashiach. They're both referring to either the Mashiach or to the anointed king, that's our shield, right? Imagine that a king, right, the anointed king could be referred to as a shield because he protects the people. Or if we're referring to the Messiah, right, to the Messiah to come at the end of time, that could also be referred to as a shield, right? Also as a form of protection. And he says, ki tov yom b'chatzerecha me'alef. He says, better better one day in your court than 1,000. Okay, so he translates it nicely here. Than 1,000 years anywhere else. Okay, probably, right? Better one day in your house than 1,000 anywhere else. Zebacharti histofef bebet. He says, I prefer to stand at the entrance of God's house, midor ba'alei resha, than to live then it's really midor ba'alei, than to live in the than to live. Dor means like to live an extended time, right? There are different words. Remember we said before, Ashrei Yoshvei B'teked Yoshvei means to live someplace for a while. Here, I mean to dwell in the tents of evil, right? So I would rather be to stand and sit by the entrance of the doorway of your house, right? Um, where people step and where there's no particular dignity, there's nothing particularly beautiful there, but just to be close to you would be better than to be in the house in the tents of the wicked, right? In the tents of in the imagine the beautiful well-appointed tents of the wicked. Ki shemesh magen Hashem Elokim. He says, "For God is the sun and the shield. Hein v'kavod yitein Adonai." And God gives hein v'kavod. He gives grace and honor. Um, Kavod also means respect, right? He gives grace and respect. V'lo yimna tov, and he doesn't withhold any goodness. L'holchim b'tamim, for those who go with simplicity. And this idea of simplicity is a very, when it says v'holchim b'tamim, to go with simplicity, it also means can mean wholeheartedness. Timimut also means wholeheartedness. We know we've mentioned this word before. It can mean simplicity, even in the way of being a little simple, in the way of referring to a person as simple can be insulting, right? Can mean that a person is a little dumb, right? If they're considered to be simple, and even that, but that person goes wholeheartedly with God and without a lot of complication, without a lot of sophistication. Now, there's a lot to be said for serving God with real simplicity. Sometimes we try to find all sorts of complicated things. we try to pray in some very complicated way, where we are doing all these special meditations, or we try very complicated ways of doing things, but sometimes just simply, but sometimes, the best way to serve God is with simplicity. And finally he says, Adonai Tzvaot. So, oh God of Lord of hosts, God of diversity, Ashrei Adam Botei Bach. Happy is the person who trusts in you. Happy is the person who trusts in you. And there's believing in God is one thing, right? Because believing in God sometimes is kind of theoretical, right? I believe in God, right? Uh, it's an intellectual it's an intellectual conclusion, so, based on experience or based on logic. But to trust in God is where, as we say in American English, the pedal hits the metal, right? Where you really where where you're trusting, where your faith in God is put to the test in the practicality of living every day. Do you trust God, for everything, for the big things and for the little things, for your health and for your money and for your relationships and for a lot of those things. And um, so Adonai Tzvaot Asher Adam Tepach, and says, happy is the person who trusts in you. So I pray that all of us have plenty of trust in Hashem for the small things and the big things. So that's the end of the psalm. Questions, thoughts?
Amen to that wish. That was beautiful. There was a man who was Ishtam, and I can't remember who was it. Remember there was Ishtam.
Yaakov.
Yaakov היה Ishtam. Okay.
Yes.
Yashar b'derko, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Yashar b'derko. Yeah,
Yeah.
Odrachav. Yeah.
Yes. There's I think I mentioned this before, but in Europe, that was the custom on gravestones in Ukraine in particular, was to just put the words Ish Tam V'Yashar, a simple and straightforward person. That was the best thing they could call you, Ish Tam V'Yashar. There's also a beautiful, if anybody wants it, the book is not out yet. It's a slightly complicated book, but it's by Rabbi Yaakov Klein, and he has a book coming out on Tamimut, on this idea of simplicity, and it's really really a remarkable book. He's a remarkable rabbi, a young man with a lot of soul and a lot of brains.
Could we not study this book? That sounds interesting to
We
me.
could. I mean, I have to, when it comes out, when it finally is, I have a proof copy. I have a secret proof copy, but when it comes out, it should be really great.
So is it Breslov Hasidus?
Well, it's yes and no. It's really kind of more than that. He goes through he goes through like all of the Hasidic masters and midrashim and all these things. He basically just sort of covers the topic from every place he could possibly find. Although I should say that Rabbi Nachman did emphasize a lot this idea of tamimut, right? Of going with God in a simple way. Even, and that, he very much liked it's Rabbi Yaakov Klein, and I think it's called Tamimut. I think it's called Tamimut. Tamimus. I'm sure he would never say Tamimus. If you want, I probably have a link to the proof I could probably send you, Nathan.
I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say sophistication, but it's not easy to be simple. It sounds simple, as you're saying, in a negative connotation, kind of silly, stupid, uncomplicated. But I think it actually takes a lot of effort and a work of mind to get to this simplicity. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not, it looks simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah, especially if you've, there's a beautiful story. We should learn that story, actually. We should do one of Rabbi Nachman's stories. Here's a story, the sophisticate and the simpleton, the Chacham and the Tam.
Yes.
And it's a great story. It's a wonderful story. It's really deep. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And I remember when I first read it, I thought to myself, I'm definitely the Chacham. I'm definitely like the sophisticate type. And then I realized like I was trained for that. Like it's very hard for me to be simple because I was really trained to think in the most complicated way possible. I went to graduate school, and like, graduate school was like it was like a crash course in how to make everything way more complicated than it really should be. That was
And
what, um, how to turn the simplest thing into a dissertation. And so sorry, Kaylin. Um,
yeah.
but so I've
Really,
like
it's
I've had to undo my education to a large
In
extent.
his commentary on the Haggadah, the Vilna Gaon says the Tam is the superior son.
Hmm. That's right. And actually, so Reb Nosson of Breslov also says the same thing. He's sort of like he comes to the conclusion that the Tom is really the hero of the story. Um, so
And if I may, I translate everything to the language of the body as a dancer, right?
yeah,
So when I think of simplicity, I always think of ballet because it's very clear, cut, precise, and straightforward movements. Very, very simple if you think, but try to execute them. Oh my gosh, they're extremely, supremely difficult, but they
yeah,
look so clean and so simple, right? When you look at them, it's nothing compared to, let's say, modern dance or jazz with all this
right.
sophistication and magnitude of movements and dimensions. It's very clean, but it's so difficult and so elegant. There is, I think, simplicity translates into elegance in my mind.
There you go. And if you want to know more about the spirituality of the body, you should talk to Anna, the dancer, and she could tell you about that. Now, because that's one one of the things I noticed before is he mentions this idea of bisari, about this relationship with God with my flesh, and that's I always think of the dancing, and of course it reminds me that that David HaMelech got himself in trouble because of dancing. So okay.
Did he?
Yeah,
How so?
He was they were bringing the Ark of the Covenant to the temple, and he was dancing, and he was in like this state of ecstasy, and he was dancing, and his clothes were falling off of him, and
Oh,
his wife, who was the king of the the daughter of the king, got very upset with him, because like, what are you doing? Like dancing around like some sort of, and this is not befitting of you,
Some sort of simpleton. I think she really didn't appreciate his
Right. She just thought
simpleton.
he just thought, you're acting like, you're supposed to be more dignified than this. So, but he was in love with God, and, he just had to dance. He had
Can
happy.
I just say one thing about this as I'm hearing simpleton and a serious person? I finally saw this. Has anyone seen A Serious Man, that film?
Yes, a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize, like, I was very late to the party, but it was good. It was good.
Yeah, it was a great movie.
Very
It was
good.
good.
So, and anybody in this room might
Yes.
enjoy it.
Yeah, it's very good. Okay.
I do agree with what was said earlier about simplicity is takes a lot of work. It also
It's hard one.
it's hard work. It's you want to be humble, but even to be humble, it takes work too. And it's you have to a lot of thought.
Yeah. I wouldn't know. I've never, humility has never been my strong point. I have an ego the size of Hong Kong. So
We appreciate your class.
no, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, That I
Look-
probably only do it because of my ego the size of Hong Kong. So
Look at the
Beautiful.
bright side. You could have had an ego the size of China.
that's true. That's true. That's true. Well, I'll be back again tomorrow with Pirkei Avot, and that should be a lot of fun. And I wish everybody a beautiful day. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
have
Thank
a
you.
good day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.